Renanim Kumasta and hello. Welcome back to session 3 of the new membership class here from Grace International Baptist Church. Really glad that you've stuck with us this far. And let's hang in there, keep going. Right now, session 3, we are going to just take a very brief look, very broad look at the history of Grace International Baptist Church and just see what the Lord has done. There's an old saying that says you can't know where you're going if you don't first know where you have been. And so that is important. It all started with Pastor Tom and Miss Carol Phillips from Virginia. They came out here in order to work among the Chukis folks here. And they met Brother Mato and they began working with him over on Pfeffen. And they had a bunch of other ministries that were happening, the radio and all of that. And so they were working there for a while, and he had heard through another American that was living here named Tom Dunn. Tom had told Pastor Philip, our pastor, got two Toms, in case you're not familiar with it. Yeah, Mr. Tom Dunn, he was a Liebenzel missionary teaching over at Berea. And then you have our Tom Phillips. He was here working on Pfeffen and trying to get churches planted. And they also had a Bible study going with some American families and some Filipino families. But mostly working, trying to get stuff started out over on Pfeffen as well. Tom Dunn, the Liebenzel missionary, had let Pastor Phillips know that there was an English service, but it wasn't technically a church over at Berea. Well, some time passed, and the German missionary that was leading that English service ended up retiring, and he and his wife went home. And that left Mr. Tom Dunn and his wife, and then the other folks. There were some Americans and some Filipinos that were also meeting for that English service. But Mr. Dunn got reassigned by the Liebenzel mission, and they were sent off to Palau. And so it was after that that several of the families that were part of that English service came over and asked Pastor Phillips, Pastor Tom, if he would be willing to come in and to take that English service. And initially, Pastor Phillips said, "No, I don't really think that that's where the Lord would have me at right now." Well, after a few more months, the English service began to kind of dwindle, and it got down to just about 3 American families, and there wasn't a lot going on. And so they came to Pastor Tom again, and he met with them, and he said that if they made some certain changes, that he would consider preaching for them. And what these changes were is that it would no longer be just kind of a random meeting out of Berea, but rather that they would write out a constitution, and that it would be more of a Baptistic constitution, and to line up with what Brother Phillips believed. And so they agreed. Brother Phillips wrote the Constitution out. He used the name Grace International Baptist Church. And the people that were part of that English service read it, agreed to it, signed it, and that was the Constitution of Grace International Baptist Church. Well, it wasn't too long after that that Berea had asked, since there was a separate church now, they'd asked Grace, or the meeting there, Grace, to move off of the property. Well, there was a property across the street from Berea, and it was I think it was 4 columns and a roof. It wasn't anything fancy, but the church was able to rent it with the money that they had saved up from offerings, and they were able to go there and to lease that, and now they had a place for meeting as Grace International Baptist Church. They also used some money to wall in the building so that they had a little bit more to work with there. Well, again, later on, the owner came to them and said, "I'm sorry, but we're not going to continue to lease this building to you." And so the hunt began for another church building. Well, it was the family of Miss Marissa that comes here to church. It was their family that ended up having some land that they were willing to offer for a lease. And so they came and they checked out the property, and which is this property. And initially, I know it had had a bar on it for a while, and there was cans and a lot of junk and garbage and all of that were here. And so after lots and lots of work and a bunch of pickup loads full of garbage and cans, the building was, the land was ready to be built on. And at that time, there was the CAT team that was still here in Chuk, and so they came down. They laid the foundation, the slab, and blocks, and all of that, and they were helping get the church prepared and ready to be built. But during that time, when they were building the trusses for the church, Pastor Tom began to have his first issues with his heart. And so, since he was beginning to have issues with his heart, he got ready to prepare to go back to the States for open heart surgery. So it was at that time Dr. David Jeremiah had given Pastor Tom some DVDs and some CDs that they were able to use here. So Pastor Tom had to leave and go and get heart surgery, which we know is no small feat. And that kind of took him away from Chuk for a permanent stay here. And it was during that time, I do believe, that Brother Edgar and Miss Marissa were really helping lead the church. And services would go on as per usual, and with singing and announcements. And then for the preaching time, at the moment they were without a pastor. And so they would just watch the David Jeremiah DVDs and things like that. Pastor Tom was able to return twice a year to do the radio and to kind of help give guidance to the church. But before he went back to the States for surgery, he had met and befriended a customs agent by the name of Mike Abe. And so they got to know one another, and Pastor Mike, who was not a pastor at the time, let Brother Tom know that he was kind of feeling the call to go into the ministry and that he was looking for a solid Bible college. And so Pastor Mike got accepted to Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia. And so off Pastor Mike went, and the church kind of held steady for a few years. And then finally, Pastor Mike was able to come back, and Grace International Baptist Church, kind of with the guidance of Pastor Tom, was able to look at Pastor, and he candidated here at this church, and the church thankfully accepted Pastor Mike as our pastor. That was now almost, if I have the timeline right, that was almost 11 years ago that Pastor Mike came into being a pastor. Over that time, the church has grown. We've seen things happening, and then we've had different people added on and coming in. And then in 2013, my wife and I came out here to kind of look around, and we knew that Chuk was where God was leading us to. And so we came out here and met Pastor Mike in 2013. We believed that this is where the Lord was leading us to be at. And so we went back to the States, and we did the work of getting people on board with us. And we moved out here in 2017 and have been helping here in the church ever since. And since the time that Pastor Mike has come in, and then my wife and I have been able to come in, and the church members, we have seen growth. We've seen people coming in. We've seen several people come to the Lord. And now we have quite a full schedule. We have the youth night, once a month. We have men's prayer breakfast. We have kinder classes that are going on. We have a prison ministry that is happening. And then we are looking towards the future to see some good things happening. And so I'm not sure when you are watching this class, but maybe we've added on more since that time. But we have some big things in store for the future we believe that the Lord would have for us. It's not a long session, this one, but it's important to know that if you are looking at membership, you're not coming into a church that has had it easy and that is just has always been, but rather through the grace of God and through some struggle and difficulty and lots of patience, we have come to be where we are at today, and we have goals and plans and dreams to go even further in impacting Chook. And so I hope, and our hope and prayer, is that you pray about joining alongside of us in the work. Grace and peace.